It has been raining without stopping for 6 days straight. Not a shower, not a storm that passes over in an afternoon and clears by evening. 6 solid days of gray sky, standing water, and ground that has turned to mud. You are 30,000 years old, you have no roof, no radiator, and no phone. Everything you own is either wet or about to be. So what exactly do you do? It sounds like a silly question. It is actually one of the most useful ones in archaeology, because here is the honest problem. Nobody wrote down what a rainy week looked like. There is no diary. There is no cave painting captioned Day 4, still raining. We cannot dig up a bad mood, or boredom, or the sound of somebody complaining. But we can dig up the floor. And the floor turns out to be extraordinarily talkative, because bad weather leaves a very specific signature in the ground. When people stay put, they make things. And the things they make pile up in one place. So this is not really a video about rain. It is a video about what humans do indoors. And the answer is stranger, and a lot more familiar than you would expect. Start with the most basic problem of all. Getting out of it. The picture everybody has is the cave. Ancient people huddled in a deep, dark cave. That picture is mostly wrong, and it is wrong in an interesting way. Deep caves are cold, they are pitch black, and the air does not move. Light a fire in one, and the smoke has nowhere to go but into your lungs. What people actually used, over and over again, were rock shelters. A rock shelter is just an overhang. A lip of stone with open air in front of it. You get a dry floor, you get daylight, and critically, the smoke can leave. You can see the weather coming, and you can see anything approaching you. An overhang, not a cave. And once you have that dry floor, you immediately have a second problem. The floor is rock. It is cold, it is hard, and after 6 days of rain, it is damp. So people built something on top of it. And in one South African rock shelter, we can still see exactly what they put down. Sibudu, in KwaZulu-Natal. Lynn Wadley has been excavating there since 1998. The deposits contain at least 15 separate layers of plant bedding, compacted stems and leaves of sedges and rushes, centimeters thick, spread across 1 to 3 square meters of shelter floor. The oldest layer is roughly 77,000 years old, which makes it, as far as anyone knows, the oldest bed on Earth. People carried armfuls of sedge up from the river below the shelter and laid it down. But the detail that makes this remarkable is what they put on top, a tissue-thin layer of leaves, identified as Cryptocarya woodi, river wild quince. Those leaves contain natural insecticidal compounds. They were laying insect repellent over the bedding 77,000 years ago. And damp shelters have insects. Damp bedding has more. Which brings up the part of this nobody puts in the documentaries. A week of rain is a week of everything getting slightly disgusting. The microscopic evidence shows the bedding was refurbished again and again. New layers laid over old ones, across roughly 40,000 years of use. And starting around 73,000 years ago, they added one more step. Every so often, they burned the whole thing. They burned the old bedding deliberately and then laid fresh bedding on the ash. Christopher Miller suggested the obvious reason. It removed the pests, that is, fire being used not to cook and not to keep warm, but to clean the house. Which is a genuinely different idea about what fire is for. So already we have a dry floor, a bed, and basic pest control. But some people did not have a convenient overhang. Some people had to build, and the oldest known example of that is almost impossible to believe. Kalambo Falls on the border of Zambia and Tanzania. In 2019, a team led by Larry Barham excavated waterlogged riverside deposits. Waterlogged is the key word. Wood rots. Wood almost never survives, but permanently wet ground starves the wood of oxygen and preserves it. What they found was 2 large logs, laid across each other, joined by a notch that had been deliberately cut with stone tools. Somebody shaped one log so it would sit into the other. On purpose. Luminescence dating put it at least 476,000 years old, which is a problem because our species did not exist yet. Homo sapiens appears around 300,000 years ago. Whoever built this was somebody else, possibly Homo heidelbergensis, not Homo sapiens, not even our own species, not close. And the setting matters enormously for our question. The site sits on a floodplain that flooded, periodically wet ground all year round. The researchers' best reading is a platform, a raised walkway, or the base of a dwelling. Something to get you and your belongings up off ground that would not stay dry. Before this find, the oldest known wooden structure anywhere was 9,000 years old. This pushed it back by more than 460,000. Barham's own reaction was that it changed how he thought about early humans entirely. Forget the label Stone Age, he said. Look at what these people were making from wood, and 500,000 years later, people were still solving the same problem. Ohalo 2, on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, around 23,000 years ago. The site was discovered in 1989, when drought dropped the lake level. Underneath, preserved in lake mud, were the floors of 6 brush huts. Oval structures, built of branches and grasses, with open-air hearths between them. Inside, grass bedding again. The same solution on the other side of the world. Overhang, platform, hut. 3 answers to one question: how do I stop being rained on? But being dry is only the first problem, and honestly the easy one. The second problem is fire, and rain makes fire genuinely difficult. Wet wood does not light, wet tinder does not catch, and after 6 days, everything within walking distance is soaked through, which means the fire you already have is the most valuable thing in the camp. It is not a convenience. On a wet week, it is the entire operation. You do not, under any circumstances, let it go out. Fire is what dries your bedding, dries your hides, and dries you. It is the only reliable source of light when the sky has been gray for a week. And it is the reason the hearth sits where it does in almost every excavated shelter, not against the back wall. Near the front, under the overhang, where the smoke can leave. Every shelter floor archaeologists dig is organized around that one point. So now you are dry and you are warm, and it is still raining. And this is the point where the question actually gets interesting. Because now you have something our ancestors very rarely had. Time. Time you cannot spend hunting. Time you cannot spend gathering. Foraging in heavy rain is miserable, and it is often not even productive. Animals shelter. Tracks wash out. Visibility drops to nothing. So the rain hands you a block of hours with no outdoor use whatsoever. Enforced downtime. Hours of it handed to you whether you want them or not. And archaeology is very good at finding what people did with it, because the work that happens indoors leaves its rubbish exactly where it happened. Start with the most obvious job, fixing everything that broke last week. Stone tools go blunt, edges chip, halves loosen, spear points snap on impact. None of that gets fixed in the field. It gets fixed sitting down, under cover. And resharpening stone leaves tiny flakes, which fall straight onto the floor. Archaeologists find dense scatters of that debris inside shelters, in tight clusters. Somebody sat in that exact spot and worked, and the floor recorded it. Then there is hide, and hide is enormously labor-intensive. A raw skin has to be scraped, cleaned, worked soft, and treated, or it rots and stiffens. That is hours of repetitive, seated, entirely indoor work. And a wet week is exactly when you need the results. Then comes the step that changes everything. Sewing. Draping a hide over your shoulders keeps some rain off, barely. A hide that has been cut and stitched to fit actually keeps water out, and to cut and stitch a hide to shape, you need a needle. At Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains, excavators found one in 2016, 7 centimeters of bird bone, with an eye carved through it for thread, roughly 50,000 years old, from a layer associated with Denisovans. Not our species either, and reportedly still usable when they pulled it out of the ground. A bone point from Sibudu, possibly a needle, may be around 61,000 years old. And in 2026, researchers reported the oldest sewn hide yet found from caves in Oregon, alongside fine-eyed bone needles, roughly 12,000 years old. Their clue was that clothing there was not only survival equipment. The fineness of the needles and the ornaments beside them pointed at identity, at expression. Somebody sat out a wet spell and made something that was meant to look good, and then there is the job that could not be more perfectly suited to a rainy day. Neanderthals made glue, not collected it, manufactured it. Birch bark does not ooze anything sticky. There is no visible resin to gather. To get tar out of it, you have to heat the bark without letting it burn, which means sealing it away from oxygen and holding a steady heat for hours. The oldest birch tar from Campitello in Italy may be around 200,000 years old. And in 2023, Patrick Schmidt's team analyzed 2 lumps from Königsaue in Germany. They compared them chemically against tar made, using every known Stone Age method. The Neanderthals had not used the easy way. They had used an underground technique that restricted oxygen and stayed completely hidden while it worked. You could not watch it. You had to know it would work. The authors argued this was too complex to have been invented in one go, and read it as cumulative culture. Knowledge built up and passed on across generations. They knew it would work because somebody before them had shown them it worked. Now think about what that process actually requires. A fire you are already tending. Several hours. Nowhere urgent to be. Rain does not stop any of it. Rain is when you have the hours to spare. So the picture we have now is a camp under an overhang, full of people working, napping, scraping, stitching, feeding a fire, rebuilding a bed. But there is one more thing happening in that shelter, and it is the important one. They are talking. Constantly, and for hours. And thanks to one study, we know something quite specific about what that sounds like. Polly Wiesner spent 40 years with the Juhoansi of the Kalahari. In 2014, she published something nobody had thought to measure. She compared 174 conversations, day against night. Not what people said they talked about, what they actually talked about. During the day, 34% of talk was complaints, criticism, and gossip. 31% was economic. Who is hunting where? What food is available? 16% was jokes. Only 6% was stories. Daytime talk is admin. It is logistics and it is grievances. Then the sun goes down and people gather at one fire instead of their own. And the entire character of human conversation changes. At night, 81% of talk was stories. Complaints dropped to 7%. Economic talk dropped to 4%. Same people, same day, completely different mode. Wiesner's phrase for it was that stories, together with gifts, were the original form of social media. The stories were about hunts, about fights over meat, about marriages and deaths, about people 2 days walk away, and about the spirit world. They were how you maintained relationships with people who were not there. And she argues that mattered enormously, because those far-flung ties are what let humans spread across the planet with a safety net behind them. Now hold that finding next to our rainy week. Because rain does something very specific. It creates firelight conditions in daylight. Dark sky. Everyone under one roof. Nobody working outdoors. A fire in the middle. A week of rain is a week of night talk that happens to occur during the day. Whatever it is that firelight does to human beings, rain does it too, and for longer. I want to be honest about the size of that leap. Wessner studied living people in the 1970s, not people 30,000 years ago. She says so herself. We cannot read the past directly off the Juhansi, and no archaeologist has ever excavated a rainy week. What we have is the floor, and the floor tells us what was made and where people sat. The talking is inference. It is a good inference, but it is not a dug-up fact. Still, the shape of the thing is hard to argue with. Every single piece of evidence points the same direction. Bedding means somebody stayed. Tool debris means somebody sat and worked. Tar means somebody spent hours on something that could not be rushed. Needles mean somebody made things carefully, and sometimes made them beautiful. So what did ancient humans actually do when it rained all week? They got under something. They kept the fire alive. They fixed what was broken. They made clothes. They made glue. They rebuilt the bed and burned the old one. And they sat around a fire in the middle of the day and told each other stories. Which is more or less exactly what you do when it rains all week. You stay in. You catch up on the jobs you have been putting off. And you spend the day with the same handful of people talking. The roof changed. The week did not change at all.